Having trouble sleeping? Let's try something a little different tonight. No epic battles, no dramatic turns of fate, no world-altering events. Instead, I'm going to try and bore you to sleep with what is, officially, the most uneventful day of the 20th century. We'll be taking a quiet trip back to April 11, 1954. A day so dull, it actually took a computer to prove it. So, get comfortable, turn down the lights, and let the quiet, uneventful history of a very boring day help you find some rest. I don't know about you, but I get tired of things happening all the time. It feels like every day is just crammed with events. So much so that the idea of a day where nothing much happens at all sounds like a beautiful fantasy. But what if it wasn't a fantasy? What if there was a real, measurable day where the great churning machine of history just took a little pause? Well, back in 2010, a Cambridge computer scientist named William Tunstall Pedo had a similar thought. He ran a company with a massive, ever-growing database of information. By then, it had cataloged over 300 million facts about people, places, and events, each one tied to a specific date. And, as he put it, just for fun, he and his team decided to ask their program a very simple question. What was the most boring day in history? Now, boring, of course, is subjective. But the program, being a computer, didn't have feelings. It approached the question with cold, hard logic. It defined boring as uneventful. It scanned every single day from the start of the 20th century, looking for a 24-hour period with the fewest significant connections. It searched for a day where no major figures were born or died, with no pivotal battles or history-making discoveries, just a quiet, empty space in the calendar. The program churned through the data, through the Great Wars, the Roaring Twenties, the Great Depression, the space race, and after analyzing it all, it spit out an answer. The most boring, most statistically uneventful day of the entire 20th century was Sunday, April 11th, 1954. It was a day so profoundly unnewsworthy that its greatest claim to fame has now become its own lack of fame. It's a funny paradox, isn't it? By being declared the most boring day, it has, ironically, become quite interesting. But tonight, we aren't going to focus on the irony. We're going to embrace the quiet. We are going to lean into the uneventful nature of this one single, sleepy Sunday. So, let's turn down the noise of our modern world. Let's close our eyes and travel back in time, not to witness a spectacle, but to experience the gentle, lulling hum of a day when nothing much happened at all. Let's settle in. The year is 1954. The world is still breathing a long, slow sigh of relief after the Second World War. The Cold War is a low, constant hum in the background, but for many, life is about finding a new kind of normal. It's a time of conformity, of neatly manicured lawns in new suburbs, of families gathering around recently purchased television sets. On this particular Sunday, the world wakes up not with a bang, but with a gentle yawn. It's Palm Sunday, the beginning of Holy Week for Christians around the world, a time for quiet reflection. In the United States, the #1 song was Wanted by Perry Como. In movie theaters, audiences were watching films like Prince Valiant or the new Bob Hope comedy Casanova's Big Night. Alfred Hitchcock's classic Rear Window wouldn't premiere until August. But for the most part, the headlines were quiet. Now, let's get boring. Let us sink into the deep, comfortable quiet of April 11th, 1954, and explore the few gentle ripples on an otherwise perfectly still pond. The most significant event the computer could find for this day was a general election in Belgium. Now, an election sounds important. It sounds like something that would disqualify a day from being boring. But this was an election of quiet, procedural change. not dramatic upheaval. Let's take a slow, unhurried look at Belgium in the spring of 1954. The country, like much of Europe, had spent the post-war years rebuilding. For the previous 4 years, it had been governed by the center-right Christian Social Party, led by Prime Minister Jean van Hout. On this quiet Sunday, voters went to the polls. Turnout was high, 93.2%, as it often is in Belgium, where voting is compulsory. There were no riots, no contested results. It was a model of orderly democracy. As the results trickled in, it became clear that while the Christian Social Party had won the most seats, they had lost their overall majority. This meant a change was coming. The Socialists and the Liberals had gained enough seats to form a new government together. They began the calm, procedural discussions to form a coalition. The Socialist leader, Achille van Acker, would become the new Prime Minister. This wasn't a shock. He was a well-known, steady hand in Belgian politics, known as the father of the Belgian social security system. His return to power was a peaceful, predictable transfer of power. And as the sun set on April 11, 1954, that was the biggest story in the world. A calm, orderly election in a small European nation. Let us now sink even deeper into the stillness of this day. The True Knowledge algorithm noted that on a typical day, many famous people are born. But on April 11, 1954, it could find only one person of eventual note. His name is Abdullah Atalar, born in Turkey. His birth was, of course, a momentous occasion for his family. But in the grand sweep of history, it was a quiet, personal event. He would grow up not to be a movie star or a world leader, but a respected academic and engineer. Professor Atalar's life work would be in the field of electrical engineering, specifically in an area that sounds incredibly complex, and, for our purposes tonight, wonderfully sleep-inducing atomic force microscopy. Let's take a moment to gently consider what that is. Imagine trying to see something so small that light itself is too clumsy to reveal it. An atomic force microscope doesn't use light. Instead, it uses a tiny, delicate cantilever with a microscopic tip, perhaps just a few atoms wide. The microscope works by slowly, carefully, dragging this tip across a surface. As it moves over the individual atoms, the tiny forces of attraction and repulsion cause the cantilever to bend ever so slightly. A laser is bounced off the cantilever, and a computer translates the laser's movement into a three-dimensional map of the surface, atom by atom. It's a process of feeling, not seeing. A slow, methodical, patient exploration of an invisible world. And the man who would become an expert in this quiet, patient science, Abdullah Atalar, took his first breath on the most boring day of the 20th century. While there were no major deaths, the algorithm did note the passing of a former English footballer named Jack Shufflebotham. Born back in 1885, he had a modest career as a professional footballer, playing as a center half for clubs like Notts County and Oldham Athletic before the First World War. He was not a superstar. He was a journeyman player from a different era of the sport, the era of heavy leather footballs, muddy pitches, and modest wages. After his football career, he worked as a timber merchant's agent. His death, like his career, was far from the glare of history's spotlight. A quiet passing of a former sportsman, a name remembered by a few dedicated fans and historians. And what else? The world of sport didn't entirely grind to a halt. In Italy, the Coppa della Toscana sports car race was held. It was won by an Italian driver named Piero Scotti, driving a Ferrari. This was not Le Mans or the Indianapolis 500. It was a regional race, one of many that filled the motorsport calendar. And that is largely it. An orderly election, the quiet birth of a future scientist. the passing of a former athlete, a minor car race. The machinery of the world had not stopped, but it had certainly slowed to a low, peaceful idle. Now, let us allow our minds to drift even further. Let's get lost in the wonderfully boring mechanics of that Belgian election. Imagine being a citizen in a small town in 1954. It's a Sunday, so there's no work. You know you have to vote. It's your civic duty, and it's the law. You'd walk to your local polling station, maybe in a school or a town hall. The process would be calm and well rehearsed. You'd be given a paper ballot listing the parties: the Christian Social Party, the Socialist Party, the Liberal Party, and a few others. The political landscape of Belgium was a complex tapestry of language, religion, and class. The Christian Social Party was traditionally the party of the church, strong in the Dutch-speaking Flemish regions. The Socialists were the party of industrial workers and unions, with their heartland in French-speaking Wallonia. The Liberals were often the party of the urban middle class, holding the balance of power. The big debate that would define the next government was the Second School War. This wasn't a war with soldiers. It was a deep political conflict over education. The outgoing government had increased funding for private Catholic schools. The Socialists and Liberals were staunchly opposed, advocating for a stronger state-run, secular school system. So as you stand in the voting booth, your choice is about the very identity of the nation. You make your mark, fold the paper, and slide it into the ballot box. You've done your duty. The rest of the day is yours. You might go to church, have a large Sunday lunch, or listen to the radio. You would not be checking a live blog for exit polls. The results would come when they come. And when they did, they revealed a nation almost perfectly divided. No single party had a mandate to rule alone. This is where the truly, wonderfully boring part of parliamentary democracy begins: the formation of a government. It's a process of quiet negotiation, backroom meetings, and compromise. Achille van Acker, as the socialist leader, would have begun talks with the Liberals. This process would take days, unfolding methodically and almost entirely without public drama. On April 23rd, 12 days after the election, Achille van Acker would be formally appointed Prime Minister, and it all began on our quiet Sunday. The silent mark of a pen on a ballot, repeated millions of times, leading to a slow, predictable, and orderly change in power. There's a deep, reassuring calm in that process. Let the slow turning of those gears soothe you. Let us now drift across the Atlantic to the United States in 1954. What did our boring day look like there? For most Americans, it was a day of rest and routine. The nation was in the middle of the Eisenhower presidency, a period of relative peace and prosperity. The American dream of a house, a car, and a television was becoming a reality for millions. But 1954 was not a quiet time for everyone. Just 1 month after this sleepy Sunday, the landmark Supreme Court case Brown versus Board of Education would be decided, ruling that racial segregation in public schools was unconstitutional and setting the stage for the most significant battles of the civil rights movement. The slow, steady work of change was happening. But on this particular day, for many, life felt routine. Imagine a family in a suburb of Cleveland, Ohio. On the morning of Sunday, April 11th, the house is quiet. The milkman has already come and gone. The newspaper, The Plain Dealer, is on the front steps. Its headlines not of global crises, but of local politics and the coming baseball season. After breakfast, the family might get dressed for church. The father in a suit and tie, the mother in a dress and gloves. The afternoon would be for leisure. The family might gather to watch television. Popular shows included I Love Lucy and the Jackie Gleason Show. Or they might listen to the radio. Maybe the father would spend the afternoon mowing the lawn. Maybe the mother would prepare a Sunday roast. Maybe the children would play outside, riding their bicycles or playing catch. Their toys were simple by today's standards. Matchbox cars, or perhaps the board game Scrabble. As evening falls, the family eats dinner together. The day winds down. The children are put to bed. The parents might read for a while. The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien and Lord of the Flies by William Golding were both published in 1954, though they might not have reached the suburbs of Cleveland just yet. This was the rhythm of life. A predictable, safe, and, for many, deeply comforting routine. It was a life built on a foundation of quiet conformity. For millions of people on April 11, 1954, the day was not boring. It was peaceful. It was normal. And that normality, that gentle, predictable rhythm, is something we can sink into, like a soft, comfortable bed. Let us now focus on one of the most wonderfully mundane aspects of mid-century life, a place that perfectly embodies community and quiet routine, the laundromat. The 1950s was the golden age of the coin-operated laundromat. For millions of people in apartments without their own washing machine, the laundromat was an essential part of the weekly routine. Let's imagine it's the Monday after our boring day, April 12, 1954. A woman who lives in a small apartment in Chicago gathers her family's laundry. She walks a few blocks to the corner laundromat. The air inside would be warm and humid, thick with the clean smell of soap powder. The room would be filled with the rhythmic, sloshing sound of a dozen machines churning away, punctuated by the clink of coins in slots and the thud of heavy doors. She would load her clothes, pour in a box of Tide or Cheer, and feed a handful of quarters into the slots. With a satisfying clunk, the machine would spring to life. And now, she waits. The laundromat was a kind of unintentional community center. She might chat with other women from the neighborhood about their children, the price of groceries, or a recipe they saw in a magazine, weaving the social fabric of their community over the gentle hum of the machines. After the wash, she'd transfer the heavy, wet clothes into a dryer. Another handful of coins, and the drum would begin to tumble. Finally, she would pull the warm, dry laundry out, fold it on a large communal table, and walk home, her weekly task complete. There is nothing epic about this story. It is a small, quiet slice of life. It is the texture of a bygone era, the weight of wet laundry, the smell of soap, the sound of coins in a slot. Let these simple, sensory details fill your mind. Let the gentle, repetitive rhythm of the washing machines lull you into a state of deep and peaceful rest. There are no headlines here, no great events, just the deeply calming, profoundly boring, and utterly beautiful routine of ordinary life. And now, as the sounds of 1954 begin to fade, as the gentle hum of the laundromat and the quiet chatter of the polling station recede into the distance, let yourself drift. If slow, uneventful histories like this one help you find some rest, feel free to subscribe. There's no pressure here. This is just a space for quiet. If you feel like it, maybe leave a comment telling us where in the world you're listening from tonight. It's a nice way to feel a quiet connection with others who are also seeking a peaceful night's sleep. The world of April 11, 1954, is now closing its eyes. The world of April 11, 1954 is now closing its eyes. In Belgium, the politicians are just beginning their quiet dance of coalition building. In Turkey, a future scientist is sleeping in his crib. In the suburbs of America, the televisions are being turned off, one by one, the small white dots shrinking into darkness in the center of the screens. It was a day without climax, a day without drama. A day that proves that history is not just a collection of big moments, but also the vast, quiet, peaceful spaces in between. The spaces where most of life is actually lived. The spaces where we can find rest. Let the silence of that Sunday wash over you. Let the profound, wonderful boredom of it all be your blanket. The spaces where most of life is actually lived. The spaces where we can find rest. Let the silence of that Sunday wash over you. Let the profound, wonderful boredom of it all be your blanket. There is nothing more to see, nothing more to hear, nothing more is going to happen. Thanks for watching. Good night.